Right, I'd like to invite Sir Cyril Chandler to join us for the reports from the committees, and to kick off, if I may, with Ed, the Audit Committee.
Yeah, I'll be brief. We will cover the annual report and accounts this afternoon, Malcolm, but in addition to your thanks, I think we should recognise the fantastic work done by internal audit Deloitte over the course of the last year, by the support we've had from the Department of Health, and indeed the NAO in getting to where we hope to get to in front of recess. I go back to the board assurance framework, which we covered this morning. It is management's job to identify, manage, mitigate risks, and we as an audit committee will look at the assurance mechanisms. We've taken the view that in the coming year we want to take some deep dives into selective risks there, and we've set out here the areas which we think are right, but we'd be happy to take observations from other board members as to their views. We can't cover everything. And the last point I'd make is on counter fraud, error, dispersion or leakage of money. We are going to go through a process in the coming year, which we started with Paul, of looking at using world-class best practice analytics, which will be needed to look at the way in which we can reduce the incidence of fraud and error in the NHS. That's all I have to report.
Thank you, Ed. Any comments, questions for Ed? No, thank you. Victor, Authorisation and Assurance Committee.
I've got nothing to bring to the board's attention other than what's in the minutes, other than to point out that myself and Kieran are quite keen on tackling the thorny issue of outcome for patients and communities through, from the assurance process. I think that's a discussion that we're having usefully with Barbara and colleagues.
Right, thank you. Let me then turn, please. Moira, it's suggested you might be able to give us a verbal update from the meeting on 23rd of June of commissioning support.
16th of June, rather than the 23rd. Was it the 23rd of June? But anyway, it was in June.
We'll get the date right
yes,
in the minutes.
Thank you. 3 points really I would raise, Malcolm, or report to the board. We had an update on the lead provider framework, and in particular the positive response that we'd had to that, and the plans to have additional lots to assist access to niche suppliers. Secondly, we had a report on CSU performance and noted that they had gained an additional 96 million of income on top of the planned surplus of 45, which I think was very good performance. And my third point is the context for that performance, really, which is, of course, the continued change in the architecture of CSUs. And the two that we had reports on, Central, Eastern and North West London, both I think being very well handled, but that was nearly 1,200 staff that were being affected by that, so we shouldn't fail to recognise again the scale of change that people are having to undergo in CSUs.
Thank you very much. Efficiency controls, Paul.
Briefly, Malcolm, so the first page is kind of as it always is, it has the board numbers in it. The second page, the paragraph 3, has got bigger than it has been in previous reports. Basically, every month up to now, or every board meeting up to now, I've been saying we're making progress, kind of rationalising the controls, making sure they improve. I think we've come to the conclusion, however, that we need a pretty fundamental look at the controls and the processes that we've got around procurement, really for two reasons. One of which is I think it's been clear to us throughout the year, certainly those of us who have the privilege of sitting every Thursday afternoon for an hour and a half looking at stuff, that we haven't got a set of controls that is suitable for a complex system that's managing budgets of £96 billion, etc., etc. It just is far too cumbersome the way we've got it set up. In part, that is due to external requirements placed upon us under the efficiency controls for which this committee is responsible. In part, it's the way we've set up our own internal processes and financial arrangements. And under the aegis of the Organisational Alignment and Capability Programme, which you've talked about already, we will therefore be doing quite a major project to revisit all of that and make sure we've got something which has the right balance between wanting to be an excellent organisation that controls its procurement and makes sure that the money is spent wisely, but doesn't hamper the organisation from doing the things that it needs to do. And in so doing, addresses some of the things which have come through, which the Audit Committee has been looking at, which the internal auditors have looked at, which is suggesting similarly that it's not a fit-for-purpose regime. And secondly, as a consequence of that in part, there's been less than 100% compliance with that regime, and clearly we need a regime which is fit for purpose and is then complied with. So that's what the project is. It's going to be a quick project, therefore action over the next few months to put all of that right.
Just saying another way what Paul has just said, this kind of exemplifies the issues we've got about the scope of authority that our area directors have. What is the relationship between what area teams are doing, regions, the national office and so on. So frankly, we've got to get more delegation of authority for a number of decisions that should be made by our senior frontline leaders. But then the quid pro quo is, for those things where the delegation of authority specifies national controls, they've got to be adhered to 100% without exception.
That's reasonably clear. So
99%.
yes, good. Okay, moving on. Finance and investment, Moira.
I don't think there's anything I want to draw the board's attention to, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. Directly commissioned services, Victor.
I shared that meeting in your stead, Malcolm. It was
Thank you for doing
fascinating. I've got nothing
Are there any other comments?
much to report than the comments that are minuted that are in the minutes. Other than to say, I was really taken aback by the sheer scale of the challenge and the complexity of it, and the fact that we need to really think about the effectiveness of the governance and efficiencies thereof.
So without being a broken record, this is another example of why, when it comes to specialised commissioning, again, we've got the opportunity to think about what it is CCGs individually or collectively are doing, as against all of this stuff ending up in a board committee nationally. So it's the corollary of the conversation we were having on efficiency controls.
Yeah.
And just to take Simon's point further, we are, he and I, quite committed over the summer to reviewing the entire committee structure. For the board to make sure that the allocations are to frontline leaders are appropriate, that the decisions that are taken by the executive team have appropriate lines of sight to the board, and that the board committees are charged with responsibilities that oversee, assure and relate to strategy.
I mean, Malcolm, I was just struck again, it's the same question, the outcomes for patients in this being a relevant feature for our governance.
Okay. Well, on that note, perhaps Cyril on quality and clinical risk.
Well, just one thing. We reviewed, among other things, the work on incentives and patient safety, and I'd just like to link those two together. It's a complex area, but our hope is that as incentives are redesigned, they will link into the NHS outcomes framework and be seen to impact on improving the patient experience, the patient safety, and indeed reducing, where possible, the amenable mortality. And we will be discussing that more in September. Thank you.
Comments? No? Thank you very much. May I then move to congenital heart disease? This, by the way, is not a committee of the board, it's a task and finish group. Finishing line has moved a little further away from where we had hoped it would be. But let me just very quickly set the context for this. This is a review that follows some 15 years after Sir Ian Kennedy's review of Bristol. And we are still, I think, searching for a solution that will give us an acceptable service with nationally and internationally acceptable specifications for children's heart surgery and for congenital heart disease wrapped around that. It went through a quite complex and controversial process called the Safe and Sustainable Review. That subsequently came up with a set of recommendations that then went to the Independent Reconfiguration Panel, which raised, I think, objections that were valid and sufficient to cause us to decide not to proceed with Safe and Sustainable, but to start over again. That process kicked off a year ago. We had hoped to be able to, by the end of the year, bring a new set of proposals to the board. But I think what has been commendable about the process is that it has been broadened in its scope so as to extend now to adult congenital heart disease as well as children's congenital heart disease, which was an issue raised by the independent reconfiguration panel. It's been extended also in its scope to look at the related services that a provider must provide in order competently to handle congenital heart disease. And I think it's also been a painstaking process in ensuring that all stakeholders, including providers, families and others, have been at the table and have been completely informed as the discussions have gone on. So that I make no apology on behalf of the Task and Finish group that this is taking longer than we had originally aspired to, because I have still some confidence that at the end of the process we will come up with a set of national specifications that will be, I think, highly regarded and acceptable across the piece. There is a full report of Year 1 amongst the papers, which I know colleagues will have read, and you will know from that that we anticipate going out to consultation in September with a proposal that will help us to join up a national view. This is not a matter of picking and choosing providers. This is a national specification for what we want around congenital heart disease. At a time when the incidence of congenital heart disease is rising, the number of adults or children rising to adulthood, of course, is also rising. So the context is already different from that where the Safe and Sustainable Review set out originally. So there's a full report in the papers, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions on it. In which case, no. So the only remaining item under this heading, John Schick, is Board Committee Annual Reports.
Thank you. I would just like the board to agree the recommendations here, in particular just some minor changes to terms of reference of some of the committees, which will just see them through while we're doing the review work that you mentioned earlier. They can carry on until we come up with a new structure.
Right. Thank you all very much. Any other business? I have none, except to let you know of our next meeting, which is to be on the 19th of September, and it will be also relating to our annual general meeting. Last year we held our first AGM of the NHS, and this year I know that there are some really interesting proposals being developed by Tim and his team for engagement with patients and the full engagement of all of the board in a day of work and learning. So unless anybody else has any other business, I'll close this part of the meeting, and the board will then move into private session subsequently today to deal with matters on that agenda. Thank you everybody for attending. The meeting is closed.